A corporate gala. Flashing cameras. The young CEO steps onto the stage, with her 8-year-old daughter by her side. Then through the crowd a man pulls out a gun, aimed directly at the little girl. But who is this man, and why is he willing to die for a child that isn't his? Screams erupt. Guests scramble for the exit, security frozen in shock. But one man doesn't run. A man in a cheap, worn-out vest charges forward, arms spread wide, shielding the child with his own body. The gunshot echoes, he falls. Blood spreads across his shirt. His last whisper, "You're safe now." The room falls silent. The CEO stares down at this stranger, this nobody, who just gave everything for her daughter. Michael Hale was nobody special. At least that's what everyone thought. 38 years old, a single father, working as a maintenance worker in the Lane Corporation tower. The guy who fixed broken lights and unclogged toilets. The invisible man in the cheap vest that everyone walked past without a second glance. But to one person, he was everything. "Daddy, you're my superhero," 9-year-old Ella would say every morning. Hugging him tight before school, Michael would smile, ruffling her hair. Just a regular dad, sweetheart. But he wasn't regular. Not even close. Hidden beneath that humble exterior was a past he'd buried deep. Sergeant Michael Hale, call sign Ghost Wolf, former Special Forces operative, the kind of soldier who'd completed missions that never made it into any official record. But can a man like that ever truly leave the battlefield behind? He'd walked away from it all 6 years ago, when his wife died suddenly, leaving him alone with 3-year-old Ella. Michael made a choice. No more battlefields. No more life or death operations. Just him and his daughter. A quiet life. A safe life. The only reminder of his past was a worn dog tag he kept tucked inside his shirt, engraved with 2 words, duty and honor. He touched it sometimes, when memories crept in. Then he'd look at Ella, and remember why he left that world behind. On the other side of the city, in a penthouse office, Isabella Lane sat behind her desk, 30 years old, CEO of Lane Corporation. Brilliant, driven, respected, feared. She'd built walls around herself, thick ones, after clawing her way to the top in a world that doubted her at every turn. Trust became a luxury she couldn't afford. Beside her, 8-year-old Sophie played quietly with her tablet. The girl was used to being surrounded by bodyguards, used to being watched, protected, isolated. "Mommy, can I have a friend over sometime?" Sophie asked softly. Isabella glanced up from her papers, distracted. "We'll see, honey. Mommy's very busy right now." Sophie nodded, looking down. She'd heard that answer before. The company's biggest event of the year was approaching. The product launch gala. Investors, media, competitors. Everyone who mattered would be there. Isabella had planned every detail. Everything had to be perfect. Meanwhile, in the maintenance department, Michael received his assignment. "Hale, you're on event duty tomorrow night," his supervisor said, tossing him a staff badge. "Stay in the back. Fix anything that breaks. And for God's sake, don't embarrass us in front of the VIPs." Michael nodded. Just another job. That evening, he helped Ella with her homework at their small kitchen table. "Dad, what do you think courage means?" she asked. Michael thought for a moment. "Courage means doing what's right, even when you're scared, even when it costs you something." Ella smiled. "Like a superhero. Like anyone who chooses to protect someone else." He didn't know that in less than 24 hours, he'd have to prove those words. The next evening, the Lane Corporation tower glowed with lights, red carpets, luxury cars, designer gowns. And in the service entrance, Michael Hale clocked in, carrying his toolbox. Just another invisible man in a cheap vest. The ballroom sparkled, like something out of a fairy tale. Michael stayed near the back wall, toolkit in hand, scanning for anything that might need fixing. He was checking a faulty light switch when it happened. "Watch where you're going." Michael turned. He'd accidentally bumped into Richard Torres, the company's operations manager. Torres glared at him with pure disgust. "Useless janitor. Stay out of the way. This event is for important people, not whatever you are." A nearby guest turned, smirking. A woman whispered loudly, "Who let the handyman wander around here? Shouldn't he be in the basement?" Laughter rippled through the group. Michael said nothing. He'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting. He simply nodded and stepped back, but across the room, Hidden behind a pillar, a small figure watched everything. Ella. She'd snuck in to surprise her dad. Now she stood frozen, watching strangers mock her hero. Tears welled in her eyes. Michael caught her gaze. He gave her a small smile and a wink. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm okay." But her little heart broke anyway. On stage, the lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated Isabella Lane. Sophie beside her. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight." Isabella's voice was confident, commanding. She spoke about innovation, about the future. Sophie stood quietly beside her mother, uncomfortable with all the attention. Her eyes found Michael near the back, the kind-looking man in the plain vest. He smiled at her gently. She smiled back. Isabella continued her speech. "This product represents not just technology, but a commitment to—" Then everything exploded into chaos. A man in a dark coat shoved through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. His hand reached inside his jacket. Security noticed too late. The gun came out, chrome, deadly, aimed directly at Sophie. "You destroyed my family," the man screamed. "Now, I'll destroy yours." Time seemed to slow. Isabella's face went white with terror. Guests screamed, scrambling over each other. Security officers reached for their weapons, but they were too far away. The gunman's finger moved toward the trigger, and Michael moved. No thought. Pure instinct. The training he'd buried for 6 years erupted to the surface. His toolkit crashed to the floor. His legs propelled him forward. With speed and precision. 3 seconds. That's all it took. He crossed 20 feet of ballroom floor. Michael launched himself up the stage steps. The gunman's eyes widened in surprise. Michael threw his body between the gun and the little girl. Arms spread wide, like a shield. The shot rang out, deafening, final. Michael's body jerked. Blood blossomed across his white shirt. But Sophie was untouched. He crashed to his knees, then wrapped his arms around the trembling child, pulling her down, covering her completely. "You're safe now," he whispered. Then his eyes found Ella in the crowd. His little girl stood frozen, hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. He mouthed the words, "I love you, sweetheart." Isabella dropped to her knees beside him, hands shaking. "Oh God, oh my God." "Someone call an ambulance." Michael's body went limp. Sophie clung to him, sobbing. "Don't go. Please don't go." Blood pooled on the stage. His breathing became shallow, labored. Around them, guests stood in shocked clusters. Some were crying, others had their phones out, recording everything. The very people who'd laughed at him minutes ago now stared in horror. Torres stood near the stage, his face pale, the smirk completely gone. Paramedics burst through the doors. "Everyone move back. Give us room!" Gunshot to the upper chest. Pulse weak. "We need to move now." Ella pushed through the crowd, running toward the stage. "Daddy, Daddy!" She collapsed beside her father, grabbing his free hand. "Daddy, please. Please don't leave me. You promised." Michael's eyes fluttered open, briefly. He squeezed her hand weakly. "My brave girl." Then his eyes closed again. The paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher. "We're losing him." "We need to go now." They rushed him toward the exit, Ella running alongside, still holding his hand. Sophie watched them go, her white dress stained with his blood. She stood trembling, replaying his whisper. "You're safe now." The ambulance screamed through the city streets. Inside, paramedics worked frantically. Ella sat strapped in the corner, watching helplessly. At the hospital, Michael was rushed into emergency surgery. The waiting room filled quickly. Ella sat alone on a plastic chair, staring at the operating room doors. Isabella approached slowly, Sophie clutching her hand. She sat down beside Ella. "Your father?" Isabella's voice cracked. "He saved my daughter's life." Ella didn't look up. "He saves everyone. That's what heroes do. What's his name?" "I don't even know his name." "Michael Hale." Ella's voice was barely a whisper. "He's a maintenance worker in your building. You probably never noticed him." Isabella felt the words, like a slap. She hadn't noticed him. None of them had. Hours passed. 3, 4, 5. Finally, a surgeon emerged, still in blood-stained scrubs. "He's alive," the surgeon said. "Barely." The bullet missed his heart by centimeters. He lost a tremendous amount of blood, but he's stable for now. Ella collapsed in relief, sobbing into her hands. He's a fighter, the surgeon continued. I've seen combat wounds before. This man has training, military training. 2 hours later, they were allowed into the recovery room. Michael lay unconscious, tubes and wires connected to machines. Ella held his hand, refusing to leave. Isabella stood near the door.
On the floor,
Something had fallen from his clothing. A worn metal chain. Isabella picked it up. A dog tag, old, scratched, with words engraved on its surface. Duty and honor. She turned it over. A name, a rank. Sergeant Michael Hale. Special Operations. Ghost Wolf. Her hands began to shake. The door opened. A man in his 60s entered, wearing a military dress uniform. Colonel James Peterson. He stopped when he saw Michael in the bed. My God, he whispered. It really is him. Isabella turned. You know him? Know him? Peterson's voice filled with reverence. Ghost Wolf was a legend. One of the most decorated operatives in Special Forces history. He saved countless lives. He approached the bed slowly. I served with him in Afghanistan. Watched him carry 3 wounded soldiers through enemy fire. Alone. But he's a maintenance worker. He disappeared 6 years ago, after his wife died. We all wondered what happened to him. Turns out, he chose fatherhood over glory, chose anonymity over recognition. He looked at Ella. You're his daughter? Ella nodded, tears streaming. Then you have the bravest father in this country, young lady. Maybe the world, the word spread quickly. By morning, the story had exploded. Mystery hero revealed. Legendary soldier saves CEO's daughter. Ghost Wolf returns. The janitor, who was actually a war hero. The ballroom footage went viral. 20 million views in 12 hours. 50 million by the end of the day. People watched the moment over and over. The man in the cheap vest, running forward, while everyone else ran away. The gunshot, the fall, the whisper. You're safe now. Comments flooded in by the thousands. This is what a real man looks like. We walk past heroes every single day and never know it. He didn't hesitate for even a second. Back at the hospital, Michael's room filled with flowers, cards, and letters from strangers. On the 3rd day, Michael's eyes finally opened. The first thing he saw was Ella asleep in the chair beside him, her hand still holding his. He squeezed gently. She woke immediately, gasping. Daddy. Hey, sweetheart, he whispered, his voice rough. I'm okay. She burst into tears, laying her head on his chest. Isabella entered moments later with Sophie. When Sophie saw Michael awake, she ran to his bedside. You saved me, she said, eyes wide. You didn't even know me, and you saved me. Michael smiled weakly. Any father would have done the same. But you're not my father. No, Michael said gently. But I am a father, and I couldn't let another little girl lose what my Ella almost lost. Sophie reached out and took his hand. Thank you. Isabella stepped forward, the dog tag in her hand. This fell from your shirt. Ghost Wolf. Why didn't you tell anyone who you were? Because that's not who I am anymore, Michael replied. I'm just a dad now. That's all I want to be. You're more than that, Isabella said, her voice thick with emotion. You're everything we should aspire to be. And I'm ashamed that I never saw it, that none of us saw it. Don't let her grow up afraid, he whispered, looking at Sophie. Let her laugh. Let her play. Let her be a kid, like my Ella. Isabella nodded, tears falling freely now. I promise. As Michael drifted back to sleep, the 2 girls stood side by side. Sophie reached out and took Ella's hand. The ballroom incident became a reckoning. Within 24 hours, the video had been watched over 100 million times. The mocking, the humiliation, the heroism. And people were angry. Richard Torres, the operations manager who'd called Michael a useless janitor, became the face of corporate cruelty. The backlash was instant and brutal. This is how you treat your heroes? He risked his life while you ran away. Torres tried to release an apology, but it was too late. 3 days after the incident, Isabella called an emergency board meeting. She stood at the head of the table, her expression cold and resolute. Richard Torres is terminated, effective immediately. The room went silent. But Isabella, he's been with us for 12 years. He shamed this company. Isabella cut him off. Michael Hale honored it. One man, in a cheap vest and showed more character than our entire management team combined. She looked around the table. Anyone who has a problem with that decision can join Torres in the unemployment line. No one spoke. Furthermore, Isabella continued, I'm establishing the Michael Hale Foundation. Scholarships for children of veterans, mental health services for former soldiers, funding for single parents. And Michael Hale will have a position here for as long as he wants one, not maintenance. As our Director of Security and Community Relations, with a salary befitting someone who would die for us. Back at the hospital, the scene outside Michael's room had transformed. Veterans in uniform lined the hallways, standing at attention. A silent honor guard, for one of their own. Families brought their children to leave drawings and letters. Thank you for being brave. You're my hero. Ella watched from the doorway, overwhelmed. Sophie stood beside her. The two girls now inseparable. Your dad is famous now, Sophie said quietly. Ella smiled. He was always famous to me. Inside the room, Michael watched the news coverage with disbelief. Colonel Peterson visited again. The president wants to award you the Civilian Medal of Valor. Michael shook his head. I don't need medals. It's not about what you need, son, Peterson replied gently. It's about showing the world what courage looks like. Real courage. Outside, crowds gathered, holding signs. Thank you, Michael. Heroes walk among us. The story had touched something deep. A reminder that heroism doesn't announce itself. That the most powerful people aren't always the ones in corner offices. Sometimes they're the ones fixing the lights. The ones we never see until the moment we need them most. 2 weeks later, Michael was finally discharged. He turned down interview requests from every major network, declined book deals, and refused movie offers. I just want to go home with my daughter, he'd told them all, but there was one visit he couldn't refuse. Isabella and Sophie came to his small apartment on a Sunday afternoon. It was modest, clean, filled with photos of Ella. Sophie carried something wrapped in paper. She walked up to Michael. I made this for you, she said shyly. Michael unwrapped it. A drawing. It showed a man with angel wings, arms spread wide, shielding a small girl. Above them, written in a child's handwriting, Uncle Michael, my guardian angel. Michael's eyes filled with tears. This is beautiful, Sophie. Thank you. Sophie hugged him gently. You gave me my life back. I'll never forget that. Isabella stepped forward, her composure finally cracking. I spent my whole life judging people by their titles, their clothes, their bank accounts. She knelt down to his level. My daughter. She sees who you truly are. She saw it in 30 seconds. And I couldn't see it in 3 years. You were protecting her, Michael said gently. That's what good mothers do. I was isolating her, Isabella corrected. Building walls. You taught me that real strength isn't about walls. It's about bridges, connection, trust. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is a contract. Director of Security. You can start whenever you're ready, or never. The offer stands forever. Michael took the envelope, but didn't open it. I'll think about it. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows. Ella and Sophie sat together on the floor, drawing, laughing. Two girls who'd found friendship in tragedy. Michael watched them, a small smile crossing his face. You know what I realized? He said quietly to Isabella. I thought I left the battlefield forever when Ella was born. Thought I'd traded duty for diapers, honor for homework. He touched his chest where the scar would remain forever. But fatherhood is the most important battlefield there is. Every day is a mission. Every decision matters. Isabella nodded, understanding washing over her face. Courage never retires, Michael continued. It just changes uniforms. Michael looked at his daughter, at Sophie, at the simple joy of two kids being kids, and he knew he'd make the same choice. 1,000 times over, every single time.